The Ford Mustang has a long storied history of being one of the original American muscle cars, and I'm standing here before you today in front of the latest version. This is the 2024 Mustang Dark Horse, which means it's the latest top-of-the-line track-oriented Mustang. Think along the lineage of the Mach 1 and Boss 302 that predated it. They decided that this time they could sell more if they gave it a random name. Dark Horse. Now, this latest Mustang hasn't been selling very well, and it's been a little bit controversial for a couple things. Number one is the styling. The fact that it looks quite similar to the previous generation S550 Mustang, and it's sort of just an evolution rather than a revolution like previous Mustangs have typically been. But the latest generation Mustang sort of follows the trend of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it's sort of an edgier, more angular take on the S550 generation Mustang's design. The latest version of the Mustang and its styling has definitely grown on me, however, especially in GT and Dark Horse form. I think it's adopted this sort of sinister, low-down, high-performance, cool look, and I dig it. I really like the look of the current generation Mustang, but I can understand why people have been a little bit upset about the fact that it looks a lot like the old one. And that's because it still shares the platform and some interior bits from the old one. It's not completely a brand new Mustang, but it's still a Mustang. It's still offered with a manual transmission like what this car has, and it still has a big throbbing, naturally aspirated American freedom-filled V8 under the hood, which in the Dark Horse is pushing 500 horsepower. But we're gonna get to the engine in a minute as we go along our review type tour of the 2024 Mustang Dark Horse. So let's do it. I'll say yes, I like the styling of the S650 Mustang more than the previous generation. It's definitely grown on me. This back end is a little bit fat and not very good looking in my opinion, though. It's definitely the weakest part of this car. I think the best angle is the front 3/4 angle. As you can see here, it just looks mean. So the Ford Mustang, ever since 1964, has been America's muscle car, and it's really stood the test of time. It's survived the malaise era by the skin of its teeth, barely, and it seems to be surviving the modern era with the most sacrilege, disgusting take on the Mustang formula, which is an iPhone on wheels that they call the Mach E. Now, quick Mach E rant. Okay, I accepted at first that it was a Mustang because that's what Ford told me, but sometimes you shouldn't listen to what companies tell you. Ever hear of what happened to Volkswagen about 10 years ago? Maybe you shouldn't take everything what a manufacturer says for gospel. So I finally knuckled down and realized that the Mach E is not a Mustang and never was a Mustang. It's as much a Mustang as my Adidas baseball cap is. No V8, it's a four-door crossover, automatic only, electric pile of trash, not a Mustang. I would rather purchase a 1974 Mustang II with a carbureted four-cylinder that makes like 32 horsepower and an automatic transmission, because that's more of a Mustang. At least it's two doors, at least it's sort of a pony car. The Mach E is not a Mustang. I hate it. They shouldn't be counting the Mach E as part of Mustang sales, but because they do, it seems like the Mustang's been thriving. If you don't count the Mach E in Mustang sales, it seems like the Mustang's been failing, which is a bit unfortunate to think about, but we're still getting a true Mustang. So let's look at a little bit of practicality here, which I know doesn't really matter in a Mustang, but here's the trunk. It's pretty decently sized, but this opening is quite compromised, not very good, and yeah, that's the trunk. All right, let's hop behind the driver's seat where the Mustang Dark Horse really matters. I do mention getting directly into the front seats, which would imply that the Mustang Dark Horse doesn't have rear seats. It does. They're just so tiny that I can't be bothered to stuff myself back there. I know I'm not gonna fit. I'm 6'3". It'll be fine for kids or maybe your dog if you throw your dog back there, but I'm not sure your dog will like this. It's a bit loud. It's a bit loud for your dog, I think. But if you want it to be quieter, all you have to do is press this Mustang button on this panel right here next to the start engine stop button, which is gloriously red and emphasized and sporty looking. If you want it to be quieter because your neighbors are complaining, and I can't blame them, hit this button and then hit that icon, which has an exhaust and a speaker with a cross through it, and the exhaust immediately gets quieter. As you could probably hear, Now the exhaust is very, very quiet. The exhaust system on the Mustang Dark Horse, and probably the base Mustang GT as well, has 4 different distinct modes. There's quiet, normal, sport, and track. Quiet is for when you're trying to sneak out of the house at 3 in the morning so that your wife doesn't hear you, so you can either run off with the mistress or go to a takeover event. That's so that people in your neighborhood can't hear your car start up. But if you have a next door neighbor that complained about you at the HOA meeting and you hate his guts and you want to make his life miserable, that is what the track exhaust mode is for. You put it in track mode and it is immediately obnoxiously loud. Like completely irresponsibly loud. It's ridiculous. I don't advise doing that around people that you want to make a good impression with, but showing up in a Mustang Dark Horse might be an impression to begin with some people. But when it comes to modes, that is the tip of the iceberg with the 2024 Mustang Dark Horse. As you can see right here, there's more to this Mustang menu, like the fact that I can go into a custom selectable drive mode where I can change my suspension, I can change my steering, I can change the exhaust from here as well, and I can change the gauge cluster theme, which I think is super cool. So you have a couple different regular gauge cluster themes that you'd expect, like your normal mode, which is just a normal gauge cluster. Sport mode, which has more of a sporty look to it, I guess. It's just a different shape. Track mode emphasizes your engine revs on top and has less emphasis on your speed, because if you're on the track, you don't really care how fast you're going until you crash into a wall. The modes that matter are on the very bottom. You have SVT Cobra, which shows a themed gauge cluster that is meant to look like the gauge cluster in a 1999 to 2001 SN95 SVT Cobra Mustang, which was known for its white backgrounds on the gauges. It's not a totally faithful replica of the gauges in that old Mustang, but it's close enough to make you feel pretty happy. And then you have Fox Body for the Fox Body Mustang of the 1980s into the 90s, which is my favorite gauge cluster mode, and that's what we're going to have it in today when we drive it. And Classic, which shows the classic gauge cluster of the early Mustangs from the 1960s, which is cool, but the Classic mode doesn't really fit super well in a brand new Mustang. But if you're making a sports car and you have a digital gauge cluster, this is exactly what you should be doing. BMW is messing around with the stupid gauge cluster that it shares with all of its M cars. Imagine if the BMW M4 could be put into a selectable gauge cluster mode that shows the gauges of the E30 M3. That would be super, super cool. And Ford has the best execution of a digital gauge cluster for a sports car, a Mustang, out of anybody. So moving over to the infotainment screen, it's Ford's latest version of Sync, which hearing Ford's latest version of Sync makes me start to feel sick, because I haven't been a fan of previous versions of the Ford Sync system. I did a review of a Ford Escape Active about a year ago, and I hated that car and the infotainment in particular. This one seems to be pretty okay. It responds to your touch fine enough, and it's got some widgets that you can have on this home screen. You've got your climate set up in the bottom of the screen. It's fixed in place, it doesn't move, which is nice. And you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It's pretty good for an infotainment screen. And in a Mustang, that's not the most important thing, but I imagine it's definitely more comfortable for people to use the new Mustang Sync system rather than the previous generation Mustang Sync system. So this whole digital gauge cluster and infotainment binnacle, everything in here is a definite improvement over the old Mustang. Moving down from that, I already showed you these buttons with the engine start stop. Below that, you have a wireless charger for your phone, which is nice. And then moving back from that, you can see this car has the optional 6-speed manual transmission, which is still available in only the V8 Mustangs. The EcoBoost Mustang doesn't have it, and it's just stuck with the 10-speed automatic. Now in the Dark Horse, this is a special manual transmission that was developed by Tremec just for this car. The Mustang GT has a slightly different version of this transmission. This is a special transmission just for the Dark Horse. What is also just for the Dark Horse, I believe, or an optional upgrade on the GT anyway, is this weird electronic parking brake, which is designed to look and function like a manual parking brake, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. The whole idea with it is that you can do handbrake turns by ripping the brake up like this. They call it the drift brake, which I'm sure will go over very well when you're getting your insurance quote on this thing. So the idea is if you pull it when you're in a certain mode on the track or whatever, it'll lock the rear wheels, and then you can do a really cool, awesome drift. Or, I forgot, it's a Mustang. You'll do a drift and then you'll go into a crowd and kill some children. They still gave this to you so that you can do that, because it wouldn't be a Mustang if it wasn't a crowd killer. But it's an electronic parking brake. So to engage the parking brake, you just pull it up as normal, but there's no feedback, there's no clicking as you'd expect from a manual parking brake. It just feels numb and it doesn't feel very nice. But then to disengage it, you have to just press down on it like that. It takes a bit of getting used to for me, because I'm used to manual old school parking brakes. That's a bit annoying. I don't really like this electronic parking brake. If you want to give us the ability to do drifting and drift braking, just give us a real parking brake. I mean, how many millions of dollars went into developing this completely useless system? I'm just not a fan of it. Directly in front of me, I have a new age Mustang steering wheel. It shows on the right, that's just the volume and media controls. And then the configurable steering wheel weight control button is just tossed in there because they didn't know where else to put it. And then on the left, you have buttons for radar guided cruise control, which is offered even on the manual transmission Mustang, which is pretty cool to see. It's weird to see this new age technology combined with the purest manual transmission, but honestly, radar cruise and a manual are two things that I love, and I'd never really ask for them together, but it's here, which is super nice. And then one more thing, one upgrade for the Dark Horse that you get as standard are these Recaro bucket seats, which are very comfortable, but to me it might just be because I'm tall and thin, and maybe the Mustang customer is larger. I'll say larger. These seats feel a little bit too wide, a little bit too big for me. It feels like I'm a size too small for these seats, which I've never really experienced before. I'm sure on the track they're pretty good, but I can move in and out of the seat quite a lot, and I'm not really a fan of how big these seats feel. But again, that's probably just me, but it's worth noting. So with that being said, let's get out and have a look under the hood, and then we'll take the Dark Horse for a drive. Underneath the hood of the Dark Horse Mustang, you can see an engine that has been a staple of the Mustang since the early 2010s. The Coyote V8 in various forms has been in the Mustang GT since the 2011 model year, and it's a proven powertrain. And in the Dark Horse, it has some upgrades over the standard Mustang GT of the 2024 and 25 model year, which produces 486 horsepower. It has a couple internal upgrades to bring the total power output up to 500 horsepower, which is a nice clean number and puts it in direct contention with the BMW M4. But it's also an atmospheric V8, which means no turbochargers, no supercharger. It's just pure, naturally aspirated American V8 glory tied to the rear wheels via a 6-speed manual transmission, which is what you want. The Dark Horse and Mustang GT are also offered with a 10-speed automatic, which is nice for if you don't want to drive a manual, but I suggest you do in a Mustang GT because that adds to the fun and the overall experience. And when it comes to other upgrades, I already showed you the 6-speed manual transmission that's bespoke for the Dark Horse and an upgrade over the Mustang GT. It also comes with some optional equipment as standard, like special MagneRide suspension, which is also adaptable, and it's also a little bit tighter and sportier than the standard Mustang GT, and upgraded Brembo brakes. Also a special limited slip rear differential, and special Pirelli Trofeo super sticky track tires. Also, you get a little bit more bracing throughout, like this brace, as you can see, over the engine, and some extra visual upgrades like that rear wing on the back and the Dark Horse badges that you see all around it. So for the amount that you pay for the Dark Horse, which can be easily north of $60,000 or $70,000, you should expect plenty of upgrades over the regular Mustang GT. And the regular Mustang GT has some upgrades over the S550, including the Coyote V8 has been upgraded to have, as you can see, dual throttle bodies. So the regular Mustang GT is no slouch. Again, almost 490 horsepower, but the Dark Horse should have a little bit more performance to experience on the road. So with that being said, let's hear a couple more Coyote V8 revs before we finally take this thing out for a drive and see what it's like out on the road. Let's just take a moment as we wait at this traffic light to talk about the fact that it's the year 2025 and I'm sitting in a brand new naturally aspirated V8 6-speed manual Mustang with 500 horsepower. Okay, the whole general trend with cars is that the push for electrification is gonna dull cars to the point where they're all the same and they all suck, but we still have the opportunity to experience this. Oh yeah. I'll say it doesn't feel as fast as BMW's M4. That doesn't mean that it feels slow. It still just lights your pants on fire and it feels absolutely amazing. But again, a lot of that is probably due to that V8 up front and that extra loud exhaust that we have out the back. Also, it's got automatic rev matching for the transmission, and I cannot figure out for the life of me how to turn it off. I don't know why car companies, when they make manual transmission sports cars, I cannot understand why they don't just give us a shortcut button that's easy to find to turn off the auto rev matching. For me, auto rev matching just feels like cheating, and I would much rather have the dopamine rush of nailing rev match downshifts and heel toe action by myself, because the whole point of a manual transmission is the increased driver engagement, and the increased driver engagement makes the driver feel like they're more in control, and then you give them this weenie spec auto rev match feature that makes driving manual easier. I at least want to be able to turn it off quite easily, but I can't find it in this infotainment system right here, and there's no button anywhere to turn off the auto rev matching feature, which I find that so damn annoying. I just want to be able to turn it off so I can rev match myself. Again, I'm complaining. It's a V8 manual Mustang. Come on, it's just, you get to do this. The Dark Horse, again, is supposed to follow in the lineage of, there's some kids trying to get me to rev it. The Dark Horse Mustang is supposed to follow in the lineage of the Mach 1 and the Boss 302, which means it's more for cornering, but in the straights, it can still hold its own. Favorite bit of road here, let's hit it. Wow. It's not as crazy fast as I expected it to feel, but it's still easily fast enough to get you into a lot of trouble, and it doesn't matter. When the sound is that awesome, it doesn't really matter that much that the car is super fast, because it's still putting a massive, big smile on my face. There's nothing like rowing your own and revving out a loud Coyote V8. There's just nothing like it. But again, it's got some upgrades for cornering, so let's hit that here. I could still imagine if I had traction control off, I could easily veer off into the curb and take a couple people out, as Mustangs are traditionally known for. But I've heard that the S650 is a pretty good car when it comes to handling, and the Dark Horse should easily be a handler because, again, it's supposed to be the track focused Mustang. The ability to corner is a bit more important on the Dark Horse Mustang or the Mach 1 that predated it or the Boss 302 that predated that. So the handling is there and it feels good. Also, this manual transmission, this Tremec unit feels great. The clutch is super easy to get used to as well. And back to the gear shifter, it feels beautifully notchy. It's like a short throw shifter as well, so it feels nice and sporty. When it comes to daily driver stuff, I know nobody's really dailying a Mustang Dark Horse, but even with this special performance corner-oriented Mustang, which is a little bit stiffer, I can't complain at all about the ride comfort in this car. It is beautifully comfortable given my expectations before getting in this car. Overall, I was expecting a little bit more when it comes to speed, but it met my expectations for sound and for miles per gallon, and it also exceeded my expectations for comfort and usability. It sucks that there's still an electric Mach E iPhone on wheels crossover cynical cash grab that they're selling, but it's nice that you can still buy a proper, real V8 manual Mustang. So that being said, I'm gonna end that video there. Like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.